Hello and welcome to Norm's Real Estate Tips. This is the second in a series of videos for sellers. I'm coming to you today from my home in Milford, Michigan, where I work as a full-time realtor for Real Estate One. But today let's focus on how to price your house for the market. And I asked this question and in answering it myself, is coming up with the list price a science or an art? And the answer is yes to both of them. We certainly try to put as much science in it as we can by collecting all the data that we can about the market and about what's been happening in the market, what the trend has been in the market, things like that. But then there's an awful lot of art to it by applying the other factors that we use as realtors to come up with a reasonable market price. Here are the top three pricing factors that go into our calculations, and there are many more which we'll discuss. But the top one is obviously location. There's an old saying in real estate that the three most important things are location, 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 but that's certainly one of the most important things in terms of pricing a house. Then there's the comparative market analysis, which is the work we do with the data of what's sold in the area and in your neighborhood, hopefully. And finally, the condition, which includes things like upgrades and updates as well as the maintenance. The location factor is huge. And the reason I say that, when you think about it, those of you who watch some of these real estate programs on TV will know what I'm talking about. If we had a 1,200 square foot, 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath house here in Milford, we might price it around $180,000, maybe $200,000 if it was really nice shape. But in Birmingham, just not too far from us, or over in Ann Arbor, that same 3-bedroom, 1,200 square foot ranch would probably be $300,000 or more. And if you go to watch those TV shows, if you went down to Waco, Texas, and were looking at that show, The Fixer Upper with Joanna and Chip Gaines, that same 3-bedroom ranch down there might be priced as low as $120,000, $100,000, somewhere in that range, much below ours. But if you went out to California and bought the same or tried to buy the same house from Tarek and Christina El Musso on their Flip or Flop show, you would probably be up in the $600,000 or $700,000 range for that particular house. So that is a kind of a where you are in the country location indicator of the impact on price. The other thing that impacts price a lot is lifestyle, when you add that to the location factor. Lifestyle living can encompass things like water-oriented lifestyle, people who like to live on oceans, lakes, rivers, or ponds. Each of those factors adds value and price to where we would list your house. It could be a sports-oriented lifestyle like golf communities. They're very popular. And normally the houses on them are priced a little higher because of the amenity of the golf course right at hand. And then of course there's the horse-oriented lifestyle, the equestrians, if you will, who look for properties that have land and outbuildings, and that all affects the pricing on them because they have the convenience of having their own horse stalls and everything right there. Another factor which I run into, and you have to kind of consider in the pricing, is what kind of views do you have from the house. People will pay extra for good views, whether it be a water view or a mountain view or some pleasant view across a valley. People will uplift the price a little bit just due to the view. And finally, there's the resurgence of urban living. Urban living is coming back. Downtowns like Detroit are coming back. And people, especially in the millennial generation, are starting to move back into urban settings because they like the convenience of being close to entertainment and sports venues and restaurants and other things that downtowns have. So in some cases, being in an urban setting rather than a suburban setting as your location can have an impact on the price. Then there's the comparative market analysis, or CMA. This is something that your realtor will be doing. You should ask him to do and show you what the results are. Basically, the word comps comes up a lot. You'll hear realtors saying they're going to pull the comps or look for comps. I try not to use that word. I try to use similar, and there's a nuance there that I explain to people, I don't do the same level of comparative work that an assessor or appraiser would do to make sure that the two houses I'm comparing are exactly comparable, which is what comps means. I look instead for things like, is it the same size, does it have the same number of bedrooms, the same number of baths, generally same amenities, and it's important also that it may be in the same school district, which is important. So when I'm pulling the similar homes, the comps if you will, for my comparative market analysis, I look for homes that are within the neighborhood if possible, certainly within 2 or 3 miles if it's not just in the neighborhood. Homes that have sold in the last 90 days are best. Sometimes when you have slow markets like we have now, you have to go out further than that. As I said, it's best if you stay in the same school district. It's also best if you stay in the same style. In other words, try to compare ranches to ranches and colonials to colonials. Sometimes that's not possible, so you have to just live with the fact that the people looking in that area that you want to keep the search for your comps in would probably look at a colonial and a ranch if they were about the same size and the same amenity. But they are different floor styles and they do have slightly different pricing factors. Then you try to match the amenities. Do they have a finished basement or not? And there's another question in there. What constitutes a finished basement? It's certainly not just slapping some indoor-outdoor carpet on the concrete floor, painting the concrete walls, and hanging a dropped acoustic ceiling. A really good finished basement uses the same materials and the same finishes as the rest of the house. So it will have drywalled ceilings and drywalled walls and good carpet with good padding under it or wood flooring on the floor. So there's finished basements and there's finished basements. So that's an area too where we have to use a little bit of judgment call and art to figure out what the pricing impact is. A good finished basement will add $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to the price of a home that's similar in size to something else but doesn't have that finished basement. Also, is the basement a walkout or is it a classic underground basement or maybe a basement with daylight windows? Those things all are taken into consideration as we do our comparative market analysis. The CMA is not going to give you the exact price. It's going to give you a good idea of the ballpark that the house should be priced in, and then you have to keep applying these other factors that come into play to arrive at a good solid price. So you want to find, hopefully your realtor has used 4, 5, 6 good similar or comparable houses that you can agree with that are comparable to yours to price your house. Now the other thing that can impact price is condition, and we talked about that last time. But condition really has more to do with things other than just maintenance. Deferred maintenance is one of the things I find in homes quite often that need to be remedied. But condition also takes into account whether the owner has done upgrades and updates over time, and what materials and finishes that were used for that, as well as then, has he kept it up or has he let it run down? Is the condition such that its condition also includes things like clutter and cleanliness that can be impacted? So we take that into consideration, and then there are some other market value factors that are things that you again consider, and this may differentiate two houses from each other. One of them is proximity to shopping and highways. Excuse me. A lot of people want to be relatively close to shopping and highways, and so they'll pay a little extra for that, and then we price that into the house. Reputation of the school district is important. You'd be surprised, people will in fact insist on being in a specific school district because they do their homework and they find that one school district is maybe a lot better than another one. Property taxes in the area can also impact things. Certainly homes of almost the same value where one is taxed 30 or 40% higher than the other one, the buyer is going to prefer the lower taxed property if they can find it. And we have to factor that in on our pricing. Paved or gravel roads. I've worked with several buyers who absolutely will not consider homes that are on gravel or unpaved roads. So that comes into our pricing consideration. Garage size has grown in importance these days, as has storage space. Since the turn into the 21st century, those two aspects have become much more important than they used to be before that. But having a 3-car or better garage size, or maybe even an extra garage, and having plenty of storage space in a basement is very important and can add to the value and the price of the house. We've already talked about finished versus unfinished basements. Certainly, if you have a home with a finished basement like we described, it's going to be worth more than an unfinished basement. Fenced yards are another aspect that can add a little value and add to the price. And then there's a swimming pool. Sometimes people will say, I've got a pool, that should add value. Well, swimming pools, quite honestly, are a mixed blessing. Many buyers will see them as a danger, especially if they have young children that they're concerned about. And there's the maintenance aspect of swimming pools. So swimming pools is one of those, kind of washes out in terms of whether it adds much value or not. Certainly it's not the same as a water feature, where living on the ocean, it may add, almost 100%. Living on a big lake may add, 30, 40, 50%. And being on a river or pond still adds something. That's a good positive water feature. Swimming pool may or may not add much value in the market's mind in terms of pricing it. Let's look also about what the market doesn't care about. The market really doesn't care what your neighbor down the street sold his house for last year, even if it's the same floor plan. Basically, the market is saying, I want you to price your house with its features and amenities, with its fits and finishes, and not point to your neighbor who may have upgraded better than you, had better finishes than you, and say, I should get the same amount of money. Your market and your realtor really don't care what your Uncle Bob sold his house for in Ohio and thinks your house should be worth. Friends and relatives often give you advice at this time when they know you're ready to sell, but listen to your realtor. He's the one that understands the market you're trying to sell into. I've heard people tell me, I need this much out of this sale so I can go buy something else. Well, quite honestly, the market and the buyers don't care how much you need out of the sale. What they're interested in is the price and the value equal. In other words, is there equilibrium between what you're asking for the house and the perceived value of the house. They can say, or people have said, the place is insured for this much, so I should be able to get that. Let me tell you that the insurance value is the least reliable thing you should base any pricing on. There are 4 values, if you will, on any house. The lowest being normally the assessed value from the local taxing authority or assessing authority. That's normally the lowest value. The next one up from that is normally the appraised value, which is the value that a mortgage company or an appraiser would give you. Then right above that is the market value that the realtor might assign to it. We're always a little optimistic, and somehow we find a way to work with the appraised value. And the highest value of all is the insured value, because the insurance company is looking at what would it cost them if the whole place burned down and they had to rebuild it using today's labor and materials cost, and if they had to rebuild it and try to duplicate the house you had before. That's especially hard for them if it happens to be something like I'm in, a historic house, where their ability to recreate this would be very, very costly and difficult. So those are some things the market doesn't want to hear. They also basically, while it's amusing and it is entertaining, they don't want to hear what your house looked up on Zillow. And then those new subs on the edge of town that they're building and they're getting so much money for, don't use that as an indicator for your house either. If your house was built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even in the 90s or 2000s earlier, it's not going to be priced at the same as houses being built today with today's labor costs and material costs. So don't use that as an indicator. I'd like to show you a pyramid now that talks a little bit about what happens when you overprice. It's called the pricing pyramid. What this graphic shows you is that if you price your house to the market, to the value where the market perceives the value and the price are equal, then 100% of the buyers who come through should be willing to buy that house because or make an offer on it because they perceive the value and the price are the same. As you start to overprice the house by 5, 10, 20%, the number of people in the buyer pool that will be willing to pay that price above market begins to shrink rather dramatically. And when you get up to 20% or so, you're down to about 2 or 3% of the market that would come in and still make you an offer on that house. Remember that the house still has to appraise if they're using a mortgage for that. About the only people that can come in and overpay for a house without having to worry about that are cash buyers. And we get a few of those, but quite honestly, they're pretty few and far between. Also, here's a graphic on what happens when you overprice and you lose time. The best time for showing your house or getting an offer based on people coming through it, the best time for activity, as this graphic shows, is within that first 2-week period. You'll get high activity, many people through the house, many people through open houses, etc., in that first 2 weeks. And then the house starts to the activity starts to dribble off. And normally that's caused by the fact that if you overprice in that first 2 weeks, people came through and they immediately walked away and said, I don't know what he's thinking, but he wants too much for that house. And so by the time you maybe get around to adjusting with your realtor, most of the buyers who could have bought it had it been priced properly have already gone on and bought something else. And you've lost both time and a good chunk of your buyer pool. So don't overprice and lose that time. Also, don't test the market. I get people all the time saying, well, let's put it up at that high price and test the market. Well, all you're testing is the market's ability to keep walking away from you. And you're also testing your patience and the patience of your realtor, really, by overpricing your house. It does you no good. It just wastes your time and theirs. And finally, there's a concept called wiggle room. I get that concept a lot. People agree with my price. Here's the market price. Yeah, I understand, but I want some wiggle room, so let's add 10% to your price. Well, all you're doing again is taking what would have been a good market price and overpricing it, which causes you again to lose buyers and time. So don't bake wiggle room into your pricing. If you do price properly, by the way, you probably will get a good offer within that first 2-week period because that's where the activity will be highest. And then there's a tendency by some people to say, well, gee, I could have got more, I underpriced, and they get seller's remorse. Don't go there. You priced properly. That's why you got an offer in the first place. What's going to feel better to you, having an offer in hand or sitting there for a week or two or a month or two, overpriced, getting frustrated, and not getting any offers? So these are some of the factors that your realtor will be using to price your home. Hopefully you're working with your realtor on this, and you're going to take his advice and or her advice and price it properly. These have been Norm's Real Estate Tips. I'm Norm Werner. Thank you for watching.